And time now to meet our My 70s guest this afternoon. Anyone who's worked with the likes of Robert Plant, the Kinks and Van Morrison is likely to have a tale to tell. So it's no wonder music agent and promoter Paul Charles decided to write a book. The Irishman spent decades as a music agent. So many of the artists that we know and love from the 1970s, Carly Simon, Elvis Costello, Jackson Browne, Marianne Faithfull, Crosby, Stills and Nash, John Prine. And furthermore, he worked as a promoter for the Police, Dire Straits, Carole King and David Gilmour, to name a few more. He's worked with them all. And if that wasn't enough, he also spent 30 years working on the Glastonbury Festival with founder Michael Eavis, booking acts onto the acoustic stage. Paul's book is called Adventures in Wonderland and is out now, and you can hear my chat with him after this, his first choice of music, which comes from George Harrison. George Harrison, and Isn't It a Pity? The first choice of my guest this afternoon, Paul Charles, who's written a great book about his adventures in the music business as an agent and promoter. It's called Adventures in Wonderland. Why is it a wonderland, Paul? And good afternoon, by the way.
Good afternoon to you too. Great to speak to you again. It's a wonderland because I personally have been in wonderment all my life, walking around, hearing all this great music. I mean, I love records. But for me, when the magic's happening, it's happening on stage. And as an agent, you're allowed to experience that, firsthand each and every night of your life, pretty much.
Now, you chose your George Harrison song. Was he the Beatle you most admired, favourite, or what?
Yeah, it's kind of like trying to pick a favourite child. I think with George, I love the way he kind of blossomed out of the Beatles. All Things Must Pass just produced 3 incredible albums, and was you going, hang on, where did all of this come from? He'd maybe, a couple of songs at the most on some records, and then all of a sudden, and he'd obviously been building them up. I saw him a couple of times live. He was really, the one that was least, to me, obviously the one was least affected by stardom, and that in a very, very positive way.
Now, moving on to some other, the roster of artists that Asgard represents is absolutely incredible. Every single great artist you could think of, you were involved with, you along with Paul Fenn. You were working on a tour with Jackson Browne and also another one with Van Morrison, and you wanted to book them into Glastonbury. So how did you get along with Michael Eavis?
Well, Michael rang up. He appeared to be quite shocked that I was prepared to stay on the phone, because he was having a hard time in those days. And I said, but look, let's have a chat about it. Actually, both of us artists will be touring next year. And so he said, well, look, why don't you come on down to the farm? And I just loved the way, when I was down on the farm, he told the story about how he wanted to build a pyramid stage on his ground, and the local council wouldn't let him. However, he kind of thought outside the box, and he submitted planning permission for a cowshed. And the cowshed was in the shape of a pyramid. And for one weekend of the year, it became the Glastonbury stage. And so Van finished the tour, a 6-week tour. I think Van finished at Glastonbury on a Friday, and Jackson started his 7-week European tour on the Saturday. And I was lucky enough to be on both of those tours for their entirety. And it was just a brilliant summer of music, entertainment, and good company.
You tell in your book to Jackson Browne, in realising that the profits from Glastonbury Festival were given to CND, he waived his fee and said, I'll just do it for expenses.
Oh, no, yeah, totally. But that was very much Jackson. Jackson was, like Michael, was very much into supporting the causes that he favoured. And he too loved Michael. And it kind of wasn't a chore for him. It wasn't oh, look how good I am. It just was something he did very quietly.
If you had to pick a Jackson Browne song, what might it be?
I would probably pick to hear one track, Not the Only Child. I just love the sentiment of the lyric, and I love the kind of take good care of your brother, take good care of your mother, take good care of each other. I mean, I find that is such a wonderful sentiment.
Boy of mine, as your fort,
that was Jackson Browne and The Only Child, chosen by our My 70s guest, and it's Paul Charles, who's worked for many years with all the best artists, both as an agent and a promoter. Obviously, Jackson Browne did a very good thing with Michael Eavis saying, "I just played for expenses." But when you are negotiating a fee, he often plays the dairy farmer card, doesn't he? "Oh, we haven't got any money. I'm just a dairy farmer."
Exactly, yeah. He's never scared of that, and it's worked in his favour a lot. I mean, I would always meet up with him. We would have a lunch, and we'd be discussing that year's artists, and you'd tell him the fee, and he'd always go, "Really, really," you know. And I would say, "Yeah, well, Michael, you know, for other shows, they would get a lot more money than that, you know." And he said, "Do they really, Paul? Do they really?" Like, he would never let you, you know, get on with it. And he was always very, very funny. He's always kind of, I always used to ask him as a standalone joke, you know, "So are you going to get the Beatles this year?" You know, and he said, "Well, so far no one said no to me."
He was a very positive man.
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally. And again, he is that thing that every Friday he'll stand at the gates with Emily, his daughter, and they will greet everybody as they come onto the site, and everybody immediately feels a connection with the both of them. There was that one year, you probably remember, up at the acoustic stage, you interviewed Michael on the stage as a set, and kind of like it lasted for about 50 minutes, and the tent was actually packed, and it was a wonderful, wonderful area.
We mentioned Van Morrison, and you worked with him, and were you on the road when he was doing a tour, or? I
remember actually the very, very first tour I did with Van. It was a 22-day tour of the UK and Ireland. You know, I've been a fan of Van, a big, big fan of Van. Loved everything from Here Comes the Night, but particularly Astral Weeks. I think it's still my favourite album of anybody. And I got to meet him and work with him, and it was kind of the first time I met him. I think he'd come up to me and said, "Oh, hi, I'm Van Morrison," and I was so tongue-tied, I literally could not get a word out. And I remember the end of the first tour. The tour finished in Newcastle, 1978, and we finished, and it had been decided that the tour coach, would go back to London that night. We all get on the tour bus. Van straps on a guitar, "Right, any requests?" And he sings every song that you know: Beach Boys, Country and Western, Muddy Waters, Hank Williams, the whole way from Newcastle to London. And you can imagine being a fan of being in that company when that's happening. You're just buzzing the whole way back. I remember I literally, when I got home, I just could not sleep. I was just so turned on by what I'd just experienced. You know, it was quite magical.
That goes against a lot of what you hear and the sort of reputation of Van Morrison. He can be a bit grumpy and difficult.
You know, I never found that. I found him to be a very intelligent man. He's got a great, great sense of humour. I think Van Morrison, the person, is one of the best managers I've ever worked with. He's always managed his own career, mostly managed his own career, and he just does it so brilliantly. And also the other side of Van that you don't hear about. I remember that we were working more and more and doing more and more of the stuff for him, and we got this letter into the office one day, and I opened it up, and it was this from this young man in Cornwall. Him and his partner were getting married. A really nice letter, and saying, "Look, we really wanted to know if Van would give us permission for this song to be played at our wedding, a sweet thing." And I thought the letter was so nice, and the guy sounded so nice in the phone flight, so I sent it to Van. Van rang up and said, "Yeah, of course." So I forgot all about it. 2 months later, I get a phone call from this guy, and he's going, "Oh man, that was so brilliant. Oh, thank you so much. That was great. And I said, what happened?" He turned up at the wedding on Saturday, and he sang the song for us himself.
Amazing. Fantastic.
You know?
Yeah, I think he's very misunderstood. I was with him in a dressing room once, and we were talking about visitors, and I think people are so in awe when they would be backstage visiting Van Morrison in a dressing room. They lose their sense of when it's time to go. And he told me he always he hates to be rude to them, and he finds it very difficult to try and find a way to ask them to leave. Well, if you pick a Van Morrison song, gosh, that's a hard one. So many wonderful songs. What would you go with?
Into the Mystic, definitely. It's a beautiful song, and it's from Moondance. I mean, I remember listening to the album for the first time, and you hear Moondance, you kind of go, "Oh, this is as good as it's going to get." And then you hear a few songs later, Into the Mystic, and it's just, wow. Everything you want to hear and more from a piece of music. Van
Morrison and Into the Mystic. chosen by, I guess, Paul Charles. That makes me think of Glastonbury again, because you can have very mystical, wonderful experiences there, can't you? You must have been many times.
Oh, no, totally. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, you just, sometimes, I mean, again, I'm done now programmed it for 32 years, and each year it's just so brilliant. And I remember, you'd think you get used to it, but you go in, the tent is packed, somebody's on, and then the most depressing thing happens, the tent empties. And then you've got 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and you're crossing your fingers, you're wishing, you're hoping, you're praying that by the time the next act is on, the tent's going to be full. And abracadabra, guess what happens? The tent's full, And I remember one year we had Art Garfunkel top of the bill. But one thing happened, he was doing Simon Garfunkel's song, and the audience all started to do Paul Simon's part. And it was just such a perfect. Now, the hairs in the back of your neck do more than stand. They kind of pretty much break off. It's just so beautiful. Remember one year we had the Moody Blues featuring Michael Eavis, and that was as big as a crowd as we ever got in there. And Michael joined them for one of his favourite song, Moody Blues song, Questions, and it was just quite magic to be able to be there and watch it. I mean, there's magic in the air, and the magic is the kind of platform for these magic moments to happen.
Fantastic. Now, Mark Billingham said of your book, Adventures in Wonderland is a fabulously entertaining book, a must-read for every music fan. Were you encouraged to write it, or did you think one day I'd love to do a book?
I've been kind of, doing my crime novels for ages, and I'd kind of always be invited to do, some kind of book about either the people I work with or, about the music business behind the scenes. And I think that the deals were actually based on me dishing dirt, which was never something that I would ever think of doing. But I would write regularly for Hot Press, and I'd done a few pieces, and I realised the line to it was really the line of my life and my career. And when I kind of got that, I found the way into the framework of the story. I want to be taken backstage. I want to be taken onto the tour bus. I want to be taken into the recording studio. I want to see, hear, and find out things that I wouldn't normally be allowed to be present in. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yourself, along with Paul Fenn, who make up Asgard, they're still going strong. And I said they've just got a roster of the best people in the business. There are a lot of sharks in the music industry. And you and Paul Fenn, you're honourable men, which is why I think artists beat a path to your door to have them book gigs for you and stuff.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you very much.
And thanks for joining us this afternoon, Paul.
My pleasure, Johnny. Absolutely my pleasure.
That's the Undertones, of course, with Teenage Kicks, ending my interview with agent, promoter and songwriter Paul Charles. Adventures in Wonderland is out now, published by Hot Press Books.